In 1975, Bobby Unser was leading with 438 miles complete when a sudden torrential downpour sent cars spinning and stopped the 500-mile race. Unser wheeled into victory lane, giving former driver Dan Gurney his first Indianapolis victory as a car owner. Hello, I'm Paul Page. Dan Gurney first appeared at Indy in 1962. Recognized in Europe as a Formula One driving star, Gurney was little known to oval track fans in the United States. But he would make his mark as a talented driver, manufacturer, and owner. Dan Gurney became a legend at the Indy 500, a race for heroes. From his high-tech garage in Santa Ana, California, Dan Gurney prepares for an upcoming race. His operation, All-American Racers, has been a big name in auto racing since the mid-60s, designing and manufacturing cars for Indy, Formula One, and Can-Am, among others. Though his racing interests are broad, Indy was always the big goal for Gurney.
Well, I first thought of going to Indianapolis in about 1947. That was when I got my first driver's license, and I was going to drive there in my first car, a 1933 Ford Roadster from Long Island, and that winter, trying to get to my girlfriend's house, I blew the transmission out of it, and it took me all winter to fix it, and it was about getting close to time I was going to have to leave to go to the track, and I found out that I had also broken the rear end at the same time, so I never got it fixed, so it took me from 47 to 62 to get there.
Starting with sports cars in 1955, Dan Gurney's career quickly took him to road races in the United States and Europe.
I first began driving as a professional in late 1958, road racing, and that escalated into a ride with the Ferrari Formula One team.
After rides with Ferrari, BRM, and Porsche, Gurney accepted an offer from John Zink. He agreed to drive a turbine-powered car at Indy for 1962.
It was a Boeing turbine. It had about 350 horsepower, which was a little bit less than what they really needed at that time. And as these things happen, sometime about, I think, a week before the car was to leave to go to the Speedway, why Jack Zink himself was driving it, and overdid it a little bit somewhere and got it upside down, and he came with scabs on his face, and the car was, it was repaired. I don't know if it was any better or worse after that, but it wasn't the right way to get started.
The turbine car was repaired, but its performance was disappointing. Gurney looked elsewhere for a ride.
The only other car available was a sort of an unknown. It was Mickey Thompson's car, which was it was a good-looking car, in my estimation, and it was designed by that fellow named John Crosswaite, and it had a Buick sort of Oldsmobile, I'm not sure which, aluminum pushrod V8 engine, and as it turned out, it was an excellent handling car, and if we had the foresight to maybe concentrate a little more on that sort of car, it was a potential race winner, in my estimation. It was an excellent car.
Dan Gurney qualified Thompson's car for the middle of the third row. But as happens so often at Indy, race day was a different story.
In the race, it was in trouble from the very beginning. It was running on sort of 7 and 8 and intermittent and sort of detonating and not, and everything was going on at once, but it was surging, and it just, you could tell that it was in trouble, and it wasn't anywhere near its real potential. That car had a great deal of potential.
Soldiering on with an out-of-tune car, Gurney managed to stay close to the top 10 before dropping out at 96 laps. Watching with an interested eye that day was Colin Chapman of Lotus. Chapman attended the race on an invitation from Dan Gurney.
Colin Chapman, who was Lotus, was considered the most brilliant brain design-wise in Grand Prix racing in Europe. And I had managed to get to know him a little bit, and I was a great admirer of his products from many different angles, and I thought, well, he's the kind of guy that might rise to the occasion. He loved that kind of challenge, and it was for that reason that I invited him to come over, and I talked to him, and I also felt that there was a good likelihood that through some connections with Ford that we might be able to put something together.
Chapman was impressed with Indy, and after subsequent meetings with Ford Motor Company representatives, he started designing cars for 1963. 3 Lotus powered by Ford cars were entered the next year. The drivers would be Dan Gurney and European star Jimmy Clark.
Jimmy was the one you had to beat if you were going to win many races in a Lotus. But Jimmy was so good that he was going to be very good no matter what sort of car he was going to be in. And I had great respect and came to gain more, and just we got along very well.
Clark qualified for the middle of the second row, but Gurney's morning session ended abruptly in turn 1. Late in the day, driving the backup car,
I got together 2 laps that were halfway decent. They would have been good enough to qualify nicely, and on my 3rd lap, they're in the 150s, which was pretty good at that time, and got my foot tangled up in one of these things they call the safety strap. And I had to abort the 4-lap qualifying attempt, and then ended up getting in the following day.
Starting the race 12th, Dan Gurney chased the front-running Parnelli Jones and teammate Jim Clark. He ran as high as 2nd and was running 4th late in the race when an extra pit stop dropped him back to 7th at the finish. Clark took 2nd to complete a strong day for the first-year cars.
We didn't really know what the potential was until we actually got there, but I thought there was, we certainly didn't lose sight of the fact that we might win the thing.
In 1964, it looked as if one of the Lotus cars would win. New engines from Ford proved to be stronger. The times were quicker. Clark took the pole, averaging nearly 159 miles an hour. Gurney, at 154 plus, was on the 2nd row, but neither car would finish. Clark was eliminated on lap 47 when the tread from his left rear tire came loose, slapping the suspension until it collapsed. Later in the day, Gurney's car was withdrawn on the advice of technicians who feared that his tires would also deteriorate. Tires would play a major role in Gurney's future as well.
I think Goodyear went to Carroll Shelby and asked him if he could assist them in putting together some cars to run on Goodyear tires at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And I think this was a direct result of the first time that they went to the Speedway, where Firestone was on one side of Gasoline Alley and Goodyear was on the other, and they were all dressed up with their blue and yellow on one side and the red and white on the other, and they had all their tires piled up. And on race day morning, the cars lined up, and there wasn't one car on Goodyear tires. And this was an enormous insult to Goodyear.
With Goodyear's money and Carroll Shelby's influence, All-American Racers was formed, and Dan Gurney would head up the operation. In 1965, Dan Gurney's All-American Racers team made its Indianapolis debut. Team cars were still in the design stage, forcing Gurney to run with a Lotus. In time trials, Gurney was fast, qualifying for the front row next to Jim Clark and A.J. Foyt. Gurney, team leader and #1 driver, was out after just 42 laps. It was a disappointing debut. For the All-American Racers, 1966 would be a fresh start of sorts. The new Gurney Eagles had been produced, and 5 would be starting the race for various teams. Gurney, who struggled in time trials with clutch problems, never made it to turn 1.
Looking ahead, you can only see, three 3 rows, and pretty soon there was some jockeying for position. And I noticed one of these sort of movements, and then a guy going like that and stuff right into the wall, and then someone else spinning, and guys trying to lock up tires, and pretty soon it's getting from bad to worse, and you're there, and you're trying to say, okay, what are my options? You're talking about milliseconds, and I think I'll try and go for that hole or that one, and it looked like I was doing pretty well. I almost even had a chance of going through, and then I'm going pretty much this way, and another car just bounces off the wall, comes across, and gets me.
Amazingly, no one was hurt, though 11 cars were eliminated.
That's not a good feeling. I mean, you put so much into the year of preparation and all the stuff, and you still have great high hopes, and then there you are. Fortunately, I wasn't injured, and I didn't even have a bead of perspiration or anything, and I'm all dressed up, and it's all done.
Gurney was out, but one of his new Eagles, driven by Lloyd Ruby, did manage to lead 68 laps. Ruby was black flagged at 166 laps for dumping oil on the track. 7 Eagles made the field for the 1967 race. But most of the talk that year was about Andy Granatelli's turbine-powered car, driven by Parnelli Jones. Dan Gurney was not a fan of the turbine.
Basically, I felt that piston engine-powered cars were curtailed and hemmed in by the rules to a very exacting amount. And what right did a turbine car, which is taking a turbine off of the shelf somewhere, which has hundreds or thousands of hours of maintenance-free power available to it, and put it in there and have it be faster than these very restricted piston engine cars.
The turbine was not impressive in qualifications, as Mario Andretti qualified for the pole, and Dan Gurney would start beside Mario on the front row. But on race day, Parnelli Jones would dominate. Gurney ran consistently in second and third place until a burnt piston ended his day at 160 laps. A.J. Foyt went on to win. When Dan Gurney returned to Indy in '68, he had teamed with A.J. to win at Le Mans. He won the Belgium Grand Prix in one of his own Formula One Eagles, becoming only the second American ever to win a Grand Prix in an American car. The following April, while Gurney was enjoying his success as a car manufacturer and driver, he was grieving over the tragic death of friend and fellow driver Jimmy Clark.
They invited most of the drivers in attendance to come to the farmhouse where Jimmy was raised, and his father was still the head of the household. And we sort of filed through and met Mr. Clark. And so I'm in the lineup, and when I finally get to Mr. Clark, I say, "Hello, Mr. Clark, I'm Dan Gurney." And he looked up and he said, "Oh, so you're Dan Gurney?" And I said, "Yes, sir." And he said, "Come in here to this other room for a moment. I want to say something to you." And I said, I followed him into the room, and he looked at me and he said, "You were the only driver that Jimmy ever feared." And I said, "Oh, Mr. Clark, Jimmy never feared any driver." He said, "Oh, yes, he did." And he told me several times that. So here it was, probably the best compliment I ever had in my career.
7 Eagles made it for the '68 race. But once again, Granatelli's turbine stole the attention. In time trials, Graham Hill became the first to officially break the 170-mile-an-hour mark, and Joe Leonard took the pole with an average of 171.559 miles an hour. Gurney's team could not match those speeds, but Bobby Unser, driving an Eagle with a turbocharged Offenhauser engine, completed the front row.
The Eagle had a few problems in that it just didn't handle quite as good as it should have. The car didn't come out until just before May. So there was no development time. Dan Gurney, one of the best, in those days, he was the best builder. And he didn't seem to have an answer to it because his own cars weren't going all that fast.
Dan's Eagle, powered by a production-based Gurney Westlake non-turbocharged V8, was good for 10th starting position. As expected, Joe Leonard took the early lead in the turbine, but soon Unser passed, moving into first. One by one, the turbines dropped out. And at the end, it was Unser first, Gurney second, and Dennis Holm driving another Eagle fourth. Gurney had mixed emotions.
We were happy from the standpoint of a manufacturer. We came in first, second, and fourth, and with 3 different engines. I was also aware of the fact that here was another sort of letting the genie out of the bottle, and that it's that a turbocharged engine won the race. And it was my opinion, and the advocates of the turbocharged cars saying, well, here's Ford Motor Company, we can't compete with them, so we're trying to keep the costs down, and all we have to do is take the old tried and proven Offie 4-cylinder and add this turbocharger to it, and we've got a relatively inexpensive engine. Well, that was poppycock.
From a driver's perspective, Dan Gurney was not pleased.
I think when you come in second, you're not, it's good, but it's not what you go there for, so I wasn't real tickled about it.
By 1969, turbochargers were becoming the accepted method for increasing speeds. But Gurney refused to budge. His new Eagle would be powered by a non-turbocharged Gurney Westlake V8, a slightly larger version of the 68 engine. Starting from the 10th position, Gurney would move into the top 5. And when it was over, Gurney had moved up to second, a full 2 minutes behind winner Mario Andretti. Andretti's car was powered by a turbocharged Ford V8.
If you were going to compete with turbocharged cars, you better have a turbocharger. It was a turbocharger formula. Despite all the ballyhoo and the salesmanship that came beforehand, the die was cast. And in fact, at that time, I said, boys, do you guys realize that the Offie is an obsolete engine, and that right now we've already got an engine called the Cosworth in Europe, and that it's going to run at Indianapolis with a turbocharger on it, and you guys think that you've got a pretty cozy deal over here, but your history right now, you don't even know it.
In 1970, Gurney reluctantly switched to the turbocharged Offie. Ironically, his speeds dropped. He would start 11th. On race day, Al Unser was unbeatable, running away from the field and winning his first 500. Gurney hung on to finish third in what turned out to be his last race as a driver at Indy.
I retired for a lot of different reasons. I had lost a lot of people that I considered really terrific competitors. I had recently married and had responsibilities that a father and family has. I had done it for 15 years. I ended up even won a race one time and realized that I didn't enjoy it because the people that I managed to beat, I didn't have a whole lot of respect for them. You know, when you're, that sounds pretty disrespectful, but I don't mean it that way, but and I think that IndyCar racing had decided to eliminate road racing completely. And a lot of different things. I just decided on balance that I was going to stop.
With Gurney out of the driver's seat, 1968 winner Bobby Unser was hired. Unser's experience with the Eagle made him a natural choice. The first year of the Gurney-Unser combination had its ups and downs. Unser qualified for the front row, but dropped behind the pace on race day and was eliminated as he spun to avoid Mike Mosley's accident. In 1972, rule changes and better technology brought about an enormous jump in speed, and Dan Gurney's All-American racers were leading the charge.
In addition to turbochargers, they allowed wings with the McLaren. And somehow we had to react, and we did. And we got together with Roman Slobodinsky, who was the chief design man at our place at the time, And we kind of tried to conjure up what was good about the McLaren and how we might do it. And Roman was an excellent packaging man to package the engine and the cooling into this and into that. And we built some models and sort of decided where we ought to locate all these things.
The 72 Eagle, it was almost a throwaway. It came so close to being thrown away you wouldn't believe it. It got down to one last meeting even. That car turned out to historically be one of the finest cars that ever went to Indianapolis or ever ran the IndyCar circuit. It was just extremely good. That car, we were on the verge of 200 miles an hour a year before it ever happened. We could have done it with that car.
Unser easily qualified for the pole, adding an incredible 17.244 miles an hour to the previous record. He looked unbeatable. On race day, Unser ran away from the pack, nearly lapping the entire field before dropping out after only 30 laps with a broken rotor. Though the 72 race was disappointing, Gurney's Eagle chassis were hotter than ever. In 73, 20 Eagles lined up for the start, including eventual winner Gordon Johncock. The 74 field started 18 Eagles. 7 finished in the top 10, including Bobby Unser in the runner-up spot. And in 1975, Bobby Unser pulled into the lead late after his final pit stop. He was poised to break open a day-long battle with Johnny Rutherford and A.J. Foyt when a sudden downpour on lap 175 stopped the race short and finally put All-American racers into victory lane at Indy. It was a bittersweet success.
When I looked back and saw the toll that had been taken out of those that preceded us and worked with us during all the years when we went to get there, and I'm talking about untold hours of late night and privation and damn the torpedoes, full steam ahead sort of things in terms of funding and risks of what to us were enormous amounts of money at the time, and all just sort of giving it the college try over and over and over again. And we realized that, yes, we had reached this pinnacle, and the prize was that we were in debt, and that it was a great deflation.
Whether it was a conscious decision by Gurney or if it was simply a matter of technology catching up, the Eagles became less and less dominant after the 75 win. By 1987, there were no Eagles entered at Indy for the first time since 1966. But All-American Racers has continued to produce superior cars and win races outside the world of Indy. Perhaps someday, Dan Gurney will return. Though he never won Indy as a driver, Dan Gurney's racing talents were never in question.
The Speedway itself, everyone talks about it in hushed tones and as though it's really going to be a difficult thing to do for someone that hasn't been there. And yes, it was difficult. No, it wasn't so difficult that you couldn't do it.
With his innovative spirit and record of successes as a driver, engineer, and owner, Dan Gurney left his mark at the Indy 500, a race for heroes.